Living my bucolic life, the ugly city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello. So I'm going to be doing like the very first phase of the jacket for the couture suit, and which is basically just modifying the pattern so I can make a mock-up. So we're at extreme step 1. But I wanted to show you the pattern we're going to be using, okay? You can see this is it. So if you wanted to order one, this is the one I'm going to be using. It's the Claire Schaefer's Vogue 8804. And it's basically the classic Chanel suit. See if I can get it to focus on there. It's the classic Chanel suit. It is a 4-pocket suit. The version that I'm going to be doing is actually a shorter version. I'm going to be doing a 2-pocket version, so it'll be a bit shorter, and but the same basic construction techniques and everything are going to apply. So, you know, just extreme step 1, I wanted to show you how I'm modifying my pattern to fit my daughter. So let's turn it down. I've actually already shortened these back again. So when I'm measuring it, I basically am going to measure my seam allowance up here. So I'm going to take my 5/8 and a seam allowance down here. So her blouse length is 21 inches. She wants the jacket just slightly shorter than that. See how here, I would say blouse length is like down here, jacket length is up there. It's a slightly shorter look, okay? So if I'm measuring between these two seam allowances, since there's a facing here and not a hem, that's where I'm going to get it. Now I've already taken 2 inches out by folding it, but I wanted to show you how I measure that. So here I have 20 inches, and I think that that's going to be good between this seam allowance point and the top one. So there's a 3-piece sleeve. Let me just kind of stick this over here. So I needed to shorten all 3 sleeves, and I'm shortening them all the same amount. And I'm shortening it up here where there's a lengthen and shorten here fold. I just fold it on that and turn it up 1 inch, which is going to give me the 2 inches taken out that I need. So then wherever there's a jagged edge, I'm just going to kind of blend that. So here I'll blend this edge up, you know, here blend this edge up, and just trim it off. Now over here is the most extreme one, okay? And again, I'll just kind of blend it up gently. Basically between this point and this point, I'll just ease it up here. So this one where it's in, you know, almost 1/2 inch, I just drew a new line between this point and this point, and I am just going to trim it following that line. Okay. And I did measure, before I did any of this, I did measure across to make sure that I was going to have enough width to go around her arm circumference plus enough ease that the jacket should have. And I think that we're going to be fine. So let me put this one away, and I'm going to get out the jacket front and back. All right, so this is my back piece. This is my center back marking right here. And I have a measurement of 16 inches. That is to be her finished center back length. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure off my seam allowance up here. Now, there is, hang on, let me look at this. There isn't actually a collar on here, it's just a, ooh, down is up. There's just like a band, so where I have it here is pretty close to being where the base of it's going to be. So I'm going to measure from that marking, which is 5/8 down, to 16 inches, which is just above this lengthen and shorten here. And then I'm going to want to add another 5/8 for the new seam allowance. And so that's putting it just at their waistline, or actually just above it. You know, my daughter is a petite, so I need to shorten a lot of things. So I'm, for right now, first step, I'm just going to line up the straight of this pattern with one of my lines here so that I can make sure when I draw this cross line, it's going exactly horizontal on the pattern. Okay, so according to her dimensions, this should be my new length, all right? I'm not going to actually cut anything yet because I'm going to want to transfer this length over to all of the other pieces and see where I stand up here. All right, so if you can see, here's their bottom pocket. Here's the bottom of the bottom pocket, and then there's the final edge. And it looks like there's probably only about a 1/2 inch or so below the bottom pocket to the edge. So that's the guideline that I'm going for. This is my pocket piece. I folded it at the fold line up here, and I folded it down here where a seam allowance should be. All right, and if this right here, this level is where I need to end my jacket, this pocket needs to be up here, okay? And looking at that, if this is waist length right here, that's going to put it up a little bit higher, but I think we're still going to be okay. And I was debating on changing some more things, but I think actually if I just shorten it where I feel like I need to based on her measurements and the length of jacket she wants, and just replace the pocket, then I think we'll be fine. This will be my last buttonhole, so I will have 4 buttons on the front, and then I'll have buttons on the cuffs too. Okay, so this length here includes the seam allowance. So if I add my seam allowance here, I can't see that line here, okay, so this will actually be the folded edge, and that will put this pocket sitting about this high, which will put the top of the pocket, it'll be like in line with these two. I think when I make the mock-up, I'll determine if I need this bottom buttonhole or not, but I think that this is just going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead, draw this line a little bit darker, and I'm going to cut them off. Yes, I will cut them off. I will be saving these bottom pieces and labeling them that this is piece number 1 bottom, piece number 4. And see, on this one, the number 4 is down here, so I'll write a big number 4 up here, so I know that that's what it is. But I am going to cut them because I'm only using this pattern for her. If I'm going to make this pattern for someone else, I will buy a brand new copy. There is also a side front lining piece in addition to all of this, and I need to shorten this side front lining piece the same amount. The main difference between the lining and the regular is the lining has a dart, the regular does not. And the reason is part of the whole process of making these is to basically contort with invisible easing and heat and steam and ironing and stretching and everything to make the fabric mold to the shape that darts normally would. So that's why there's a difference. But in the lining, you can put a dart in the lining on this jacket. So I'm just going to go ahead, mark beginning and the ending point so that's going to match up with my side front piece. Draw a line connecting them, and I will cut this, relabel the top so I have all the information, and then put this piece aside. And that's about it for the pieces that I'm going to be changing. The only other piece that I may need to change is there's the facing that goes all around the bottom edge. It's this one, and I'm actually not going to change this pattern piece. I'm just going to cut it out as is because I'm going to need to shorten it because mine is more at waist level, whereas this was based at something at hip level, so this is going to be too long. But the size and the curve of it should be fine. So when I cut this long piece and I have my mock-up, then I can just see exactly where it needs to land, and I can just shorten it at that point. So I hope that helps you out. I'm going to throw together a quick mock-up so that I can send it down to her. And whenever I get the results from that, we'll take it to the next step. Morning. Bye-bye. So I am just going to make a mock-up real quick. I just wanted to run through it with you. I'm using a home deck cotton canvas because I want the weight of my mock-up to be somewhat similar to my finished garment. So anyway, I wanted to show you there's a couple other little changes I made to my patterns as I was cutting it out. I'll let you see that and what pieces I'm using, because I don't use them all, you know, just the basic shell, the basic shape of it, and how I'm going to put that together. So now in total honesty here, this is actually going to be my second mock-up. The first one I made, I got it made, put it up on my dress form, and realized it was way too big all the way around. So I'm sizing down in this pattern from what the measurements and everything would indicate. I would be a higher size than what I've actually cut out here. So because that higher one, it was just too big all the way around. But anyway, the changes that I made is on this front piece, there's a little dart here, which is the top. You know, remember I shortened it, so originally this dart came all the way up and went down like that. Okay, and I just don't see the point in making a tiny dart right here. So it's about 1/8 of an inch on each side. So I basically shaved 1/8 off of here and 1/8 off of here. And I'm going to omit this dart. And the same for the back. You know, there's 2 of them. So basically, because they're each about 1/8 of an inch on each side, I shaved 1/4 inch off of this side and 1/4 inch off of this side. So I should end up with the same general look at the bottom, but I won't have to deal with these darts, which is what I want. So what I'm going to be using is just my basic bodice pieces. And for the bodice, there are 2 side front pieces. One has a dart and one does not. One is set up just for easing. The one I'm using for my mock-up is the dart. And that's because it's a whole lot easier, you know. It ends up with the same dimensions as the other one once you put all the easing in, but this is a quick one. I can fit it off of it, and that's fine. So I'm going to be doing my front, side front, this little underarm piece, and the back. And since I took off these darts, that's going to make it a lot better that way. And then for the sleeves, it's a 3-piece sleeve. I'm not messing with any facings or anything with my mock-up. It's just the basic 3-piece sleeves here. So first thing I'm going to do is just sew them together. So I'm going to use I'm not, you know, stay stitching anything, because this is just a one-time shot, and this fabric is sturdy enough that it should hold itself while she's trying it on. So I'm going to sew up the back, and then this piece is going to come over here. Okay, and pretty much when I'm doing these, when I'm pressing it, you know, I do press it, but I just press both seam allowances to one side. That just makes it easier if you have to come back and take anything in. And I am making it so the wrong side is on the outside. It's a lot lighter, you know, there's no pattern really on this side, so it's less distracting. So I'm just going to carry on, sew these all the way around to the front. Okay, so this is my back, and I've got my little underarm pieces here, and I've got my fronts put together. So this is my side front with its little dart, center front, and so I'm just going to go ahead and sew these to the shoulder and to the underarm seam. And again, I'm just pressing both seam allowances off to one side, just like that. Up here in the shoulders, you need to ease the back onto the front. So I'm just pinning it on here. Actually, there's a notch. I didn't mark it, but there's a notch right around here. And so all of the ease is in this area, but I'll just do that while I'm sewing it with my feed dogs on both sides. Okay, so I have those side and shoulder seams together, and when she tries it on, I want it to look as close to the finished size as possible. So what I'm going to, because the pattern itself, it doesn't really have a hem, it has more of just seam allowances because everything is lined that way. But what I'm doing is I'm just kind of pressing under my edges of my front and all the way around the bottom at a 5/8 seam allowance. I'm going to stick a little row of stitch witchery under there and just melt that in there, and that's going to hold it down so that when she goes to try it on, it's going to hold to the edge that the final one should be, and that'll give us a better idea of how it will lay. So rip that off, and I'm going to do it again across the bottom and up the other side, just like this. Okay, so with that done, what I'm going to do now is run a row of stitching around the edge at 5/8, which will be, again, the fold line where the final edge will be. So see if you can see my stitching here. What I'm going to do now is just clip up to that stitching line around here enough that I can turn it under and press it at that stitching line. And again, I'll just put stitch witchery around on the inside to keep that line folded up flat. Okay, so I have it all pressed down like that. So from this side, I get a much better idea of where that collar is. So I can use my Teflon sheet and melt it. And then, because it doesn't stick to Teflon, I can just pull it off, and these are down, and I don't have to worry about that stuff getting on my iron, because where the little notches are, it could do that very easily. All right, so for the sleeve, it's a 3-part sleeve. Hang on. See if that works. So it's a 3-part sleeve, and this is the bottom edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the sleeve together just like this with these two seams. I'm not sewing these yet, but I'm going to do these two at 5/8 and then press them to one side, and then along this edge and the entire bottom and up, well, there's a dot, hang on a second. So I'm going to press under and stitch witchery down here, across the bottom, and up to this point here. There's a dot, so you can clip it like that, so you can press that under, and I will do the stitch witchery up to there too. Okay, so with this sewn together and, you know, my stitch witchery hem put together on the bottom, what I'm going to do is come back this way and sew this seam from here all the way to that dot. Well, it's erased now, but the dot that's just at the top of this point on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to set these sleeves in, and the side that has the little extra lip on it, that's the back, you know, my letter B. So turning my jacket inside out here, it does not have an underarm seam. It has this little piece here in the middle. And let's see here, this sleeve goes here. So I'm going to pop it in. Alrighty. So unfortunately, I did not put in here any notches or anything like that. So that is bad on me. Actually, I'm going to go back and put the little dots so I know exactly how much I need to ease, and I can match my upper shoulder matching point. Everything else I'm just going to kind of make fit. I've got this pinned on. There's some pressing and easing and steaming and everything involved when I'm setting the real sleeve in on my mock-up. I'm not stressing about it too much. So this one I've sewed on. You can see I've got some puckers up here, but it's fine for this purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this one on too. All right, almost to the end. So I need to mark where my center front is. And I can tell from here, if I measure it, this is 1 5/8. So if I take my seam allowance out, 1 inch in from my finished edge is my center front. And I'm going to need that so that we can overlap, well shoot, it's easier to see it this way, so that we can overlap the two sides accurately. Okay, so I've got those two, so that when I send it, I can send a couple pins with it lapped like that so that she can get the idea of where it needs to be done. Okay, so here's one thing that I almost missed, and it was driving me nuts when I was trying it on my dress form. In the instructions down here, it says make or purchase shoulder pads at the outset and insert them for every fitting. So I'm supposed to be fitting it with shoulder pads. However, when you go through all the instructions, it is not made with shoulder pads. So the assumption, I'm guessing, is either you're wearing a blouse with built-in shoulder pads, or there's going to be removable shoulder pads that I can put in, which again is not in the instructions. But what I am going to do is do that. I'm going to make shoulder pads, cover them with a nice lining so that I could just, you know, she can put them in or remove them as she wants to. And these are the ones that I'm going to be using. Oops, no, these are not. Let me go get the other ones. Okay, so these are the ones I'm going to be using. I got these on the 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞 catalog. You know, they're pretty basic little shoulder pads. And I'm going to need her to try it on with a shoulder pad, but I don't want to send these to her because this is basically a throwaway garment that once she tries it on and sends it back to me with the video, she's keeping that, you know, she can throw it away when she's done. I'm going to make up a little temporary shoulder pad, and this is just some stuff that I think it was a medical thing to hold something on when my husband had his hip replaced or something like that. I don't even know. But what I'm going to do is just copy the shoulder pads like this. So here's one, and flip it over, and here is another, and I can just cut these out and insert them. So let me show you what it looks like with and without these shoulder pads. Okay, so this is my jacket. Let me see if I can move her out a little bit. Yeah, so this is the jacket without shoulder pads, you know. It's actually a cute little jacket. I think that cutting it down a size is a good choice. These are the shoulder pads I'm going to put in. And let me just try to slip this in without having to take it off here. Okay, so that is basically with the shoulder pads. It's a little bit straighter up on top. I like that, you know. So that's something that I just wanted to point out because I would have overlooked it, and it does affect the fitting. So I'm going to go ahead and just tack those in there, get this thing packed up, ship it off to my daughter in Texas, and we will see how it fits her when it gets there.